So I'm going to open this up on a limb and say that Knoxville isn't really much of an art city. Or at least that's how I felt before going into this project. Because if you take a gander at the true cultural rating system, that is, the list of people from Knoxville on Wikipedia, there aren't too many standout names. I don't know enough about country music people to make a claim to any of these people, and then in the art section we've got the Delaney brothers, who were pretty significant Harlem Renaissance artists. Oh, and then there's this guy, he made the first Google Doodle. And then, lastly, looking at this, we have Johnny Knoxville, which I have a little bit of a hard time putting him down as an artist. And then, of course, the one big standout name, that is Quentin Tarantino. And if this were a regular Knoxville art project, I'd focus on how the Delaneys and Tarantino tried to hype up the Knox Vegas art scene. But this isn't a regular art project, because when I first was at the East Tennessee Historical Center, I discovered this Venn diagram of awesome people and people who aren't notable enough to have a Wikipedia page. And in this overlap zone is where the McClung collection shines in showing us the two Knoxville artists you haven't heard of. Our first artist is Paul J. Long. A World War II vet, Long used his GI Bill to get a degree in physics from Tennessee Tech, and then went off to work at the Y-12 labs. Long always wanted to have a career as an artist, but only made a little bit of profit with his sale of a Civil War painting he did in 2002. He also painted his most notable work, and what really got me interested in him, Edge of Darkness. This massive painting was at the back of the McClung collection, and my goodness does it stand out from everything else there. He actually addresses, in some paper beneath that, an artist usually does not explain his work, but here I wanted to make an exception. To give you the spark notes, this is all creative interpretation of things he heard on the radio between 1964 and 1965. Things like the missiles, parallel divide, and KKK are pretty understandable, but it gets a little bit weirder. The old man is supposed to represent torture coming from the war, and is represented by the earthquake beneath him, which is the war. Then the people on the left are victorious election winners decapitating former heads of state. And then there's that guy in the tree over there. That's supposed to be him, just trying to paint in all of this action. Why would someone paint such a weird interpretation of the 1960s? To be the cover of their autobiography, of course. The first third or so of this autobiography is what you'd expect, and then it slowly gets a bit more out there. He starts bagging his favorite Bible verses and his interpretation of the Constitution, and then his favorite sci-fi movies, and then it eventually just kind of devolves into stuff like this. And the fact that stuff like that got published should be a beacon of hope to any aspiring authors. Artist number 2 is Russel Briscoe. Briscoe was a World War I vet, took a different route to success by becoming an entrepreneur of a toy company during the Great Depression before becoming a prominent VP of an insurance company. Briscoe began painting in the 50s and painted 75 paintings over the next 2 decades. He also gave a lot back to the community, which landed 25 of his paintings at the UTK Art Department Center. These have traveled around in many exhibits and are currently on display at the East Tennessee Historical Center. He painted Knoxville-related scenes from the Civil War into Reconstruction era and beyond. Briscoe's paintings are considered to be pretty accurate, as a painting can be for scenes like this, and gave rare full-color glimpses into history for this time. He painted important areas of downtown Knoxville, which have similarities that can be seen today, and also document the rise of the rail in East Tennessee. I can see how his photos can be pretty accurate, except for this one here, because according to him, this hill, that's Kingston Pike. Like that Kingston Pike. A bit of a bigger turnaround compared to the Gay Street picture from earlier. Briscoe and Long admittedly aren't the most important people in history. They don't document things perfectly, and both of their impacts are greater after their deaths than when they were alive, a running trend for painters. But that really doesn't matter, because they are still great artists and have an interesting story that needs to be told.